everyone. So we're going to talk about the foods that make up our nutrition. A lot of times that can be a little confusing. So let's just start out with the basics. Our food is made up of three macronutrients: proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates can be broken down further into three categories, and I think it's important to explore that exactly. I know when I was a patient of Wellness District and was on my weight loss journey, I was taught to look at carbohydrates as sugar because carbs, when consumed, are broken down by the body into sugar, essentially. No matter the kind of carb that you're eating, some carbs break down faster into sugars than others do. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And why is that important? Well, that's important because a lot of people don't understand that carbohydrates like breads and pastas that don't taste sweet do turn into a sugar once they enter into the small gut. I remember one time walking around the grocery store with my mom, and like I said, I was just a new patient with Wellness District, and my mom picked up this box of crackers and she goes, "Hey, these look awesome, don't they?" And I'm like, "Mom, why would you want to waste your sugar on that?" And she looked at me and she's like, "This is crackers. This isn't sugar." And I do believe that the vast majority of Americans see it the same way that my mom does, is that they don't see carbohydrates as sugar, but in all reality it is. And why is that important? Because carbohydrates, of the three macronutrients, cause a rise in our insulin level the most significantly. Proteins can cause a little minor blip in our insulin level, and depending on how insulin resistant you're going to be or are, that can play a bigger role for some people. And fat causes almost virtually no insulin response whatsoever. And so if the key to managing our weight and our health and a lot of other disease processes that can come along with our weight, it would be important to manage our insulin level, and that means we have to manage our carbohydrates. So what is a carb? Well, a carb is anything that never walked, crawled, swam, or flew at any point in time in its life. And that includes fruits and vegetables. So I know there's been other programs that are out there in the world that help folks to change their lifestyle and manage their health and wellness. And they say fruits and vegetables are for free, that they don't really count to your nutrition. And that's actually an irresponsible statement. For somebody who is metabolically stable, that does not have any metabolic concerns, or in other words, their body breaks down their nutrition and uses it the way that it's supposed to without causing an illness or without causing somebody to gain weight, it is indeed okay to eat more fruits and vegetables. And quite honestly, that is where we should be getting our carbohydrates. They're full of fiber, they're full of nutrients. But we do have to pay attention to how much. They're not free foods. And for those folks that are not metabolically stable or do have metabolic concerns when it comes to how their body handles carbohydrates, looking at vegetables and fruits as a free option is actually a common sabotage as to why they can't lose weight, is because they're increasing their insulin levels too greatly by consuming too many of those actually good for them foods. It can be reversed. We can change it. They can get back to having a diet higher in those foods, but we have to eliminate the processed foods and the what we would consider junk carb foods out of our life in order for those to not be as impactful, if that would make sense. So there are three categories that carbohydrates can be broken down into. We have simple sugars, and simple sugars would be an example of like these Little Debbie's Swiss rolls, if you can see this. You take the little snack cake out and you put it on your tongue and it tastes sweet. That sweetness is absorbed through the tongue. It is rapidly metabolized and it causes an immediate response of insulin in our blood. Insulin rises. Why? Because insulin is our defense mechanism to move glucose, aka sugar, out of the bloodstream into the cells. Well, why is that important? Because sugar in the bloodstream is toxic to us. It can't be there. We need to move it out of the bloodstream where it's toxic into the cells where the cellular mechanisms are able to break it down, create energy for us to live and sustain off of and do our daily work. So that would be a simple sugar: cakes, cookies, ice cream, soda, fruit juices. Things that are obviously sweet are going to be that simple sugar category. And then we have complex carbohydrates. And complex carbohydrates are going to be things like these Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts would be a complex carbohydrate. It's a veggie. It's packed full of fiber. Strawberries are another type of complex carbohydrate. They both have some natural sweetness to them, but because of their fiber content, the sugar isn't absorbed as rapidly. Insulin doesn't spike as quickly. Where it does break down into that sugar and eventually drives up an insulin response is when those foods hit our small intestine. That's when they can increase that insulin level. But there are better options of carbohydrates because of that fiber component and because they come packed full of vitamins and minerals, the micronutrients that are key for our cellular functioning as well. Whereas, I'm sorry, little Debbie, no nutritional quality here. And then fiber. Fiber is that third category of carbs. Some foods have more fiber in them, some naturally, some with fiber added. And fiber helps to lower the amount of sugar that is being absorbed. It lowers that glycemic index, or prevents the insulin levels or the sugar levels from spiking so rapidly in our blood. The funny thing about fiber, though, is we don't absorb it. It is just a vehicle for nutrition or nutrient transport throughout our body. So when we take in fiber, it eventually comes out in the same form. And so it actually doesn't play a role in our weight gain, and it actually can help with managing our body weight and keeping insulin levels lower when we consume foods that are higher in fiber, because it's going to keep that insulin level down. So that's why it's important to make sure that you are eating whole foods. Well, what's a whole food, Nichole? You know, you hear that a lot. You need to eat whole foods, eat less processed foods. What is a whole food? My husband even said that to me the other night. He's like, you know, before I met you, I'd hear the word whole or the term whole food, but I really didn't quite understand what they meant by that. Brussels sprouts are a whole food. Strawberries are a whole food. Rice Krispie treats are a processed food. Swiss rolls are a processed food. They had to go through a process of being made. And in order to make them taste good, ingredients, aka chemicals here in the United States, were added to them in order to create this food. Whereas if you would just have strawberries for a dessert with maybe some whipped cream that you made from heavy whipping cream, that would be a much better dessert because of its whole food quality, and it is the food that has just been added to something for that dessert, where this had to be made. And the first two ingredients on this package: sugar and corn syrup. I'm just looking at this and I'm like, why the hell? Pardon my French, but why the hell would anybody put this into their body? There is 60 grams of carbohydrate. That is the equivalent of 12 teaspoons of sugar in a pack. In a pack is 2 of the cakes in here. 12 teaspoons of sugar. Now, if you think about that, and you went to your cupboard where you keep your measuring tools, get out a teaspoon, measure out 12 teaspoons of sugar. Look at it. Would you honestly eat that for dessert by itself? Would you just sit there with that spoon and put it in your mouth? Absolutely you wouldn't. That would be the equivalent of 6 servings of strawberries, or 6 cups of strawberries. 2 Swiss rolls, 6 cups of strawberries. You're not even going to get to the 6th cup because you're going to be so full from the fiber from the strawberries. And so whole foods fill you up faster because of that fiber content. You're not going to overconsume them. And that's the reason why we need to get to more of those whole foods that have better nutritional quality, and we need to get away from things like this. You might be wondering, well, why the heck does somebody who is a nurse practitioner and teaches nutrition have Swiss rolls, Rice Krispie treats, and fruit roll-ups in her house? Well, I have a type 1 diabetic, and that's a whole nother beast. What we can certainly do another video on it at some point in time. And while yes, we probably shouldn't be allowing our type 1 to be having those foods to boost their blood sugar when they're low, that's why. If you're wondering why I have those in my cupboard, that's why. And a lot of times they're meant for my demonstration processes for these types of videos as well. So I hope that clears up some of the confusing components when you're walking through a grocery store as to what is a whole food, what is a carbohydrate. We're going to talk next about the other 2 macronutrients in the next couple of videos.